Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're going to be continuing and maybe finishing Star Wars vs. Warhammer 40k Episode 21 Struggle. Last time around, we got to apparently a giant blue ball of having a mention of the Angels of Death dropping in. We finally get Space Marines in a fight, and the scene's over. Every single section of this is literally just fan building up a scene and then nope, pulling the rug right out from under you and going to someplace completely different. At this point, I'm expecting we'll just go back to Obi-Wan for like 5 seconds of drama before it'll just move on a second time to somewhere completely different than we've ever been before. And I've been told it's going to happen more because right now Fan is being cautious in how often he decides to cliffhanger multiple times in a video. Yeah. Either way, I've been enjoying this, despite my entirely justified rage about how many cliffhangers there are. We're going to jump right in. You guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Fan did a great job. Hit him up. If you've already done it, do it again. Let's get started. Meanwhile. Oh, that was actually a fast
Obi-Wan ran his tongue over.
Well, fuck me. They actually did.
Over his top lip, tasting sweat, blinking it out of his eyes as he slowly circled the Imperial warrior before him. The man was monstrous in his powered armor, and though the manifestation of might he had begun the battle with had faded to nothing, the evident strength he still retained lent weight to the shadowed grin he bore.
I'm sorry, I'm getting more and more hyped as I remember what the situation was. Because Obi-Wan was fighting someone who initially buffed their strength a ton, but they're wearing down because the warp is a fickle mistress that absolutely hates you. Granted, the warp in Star Wars is actually as horrible. Yet. But Obi-Wan is also really damn good at being one of the only really good light side Jedi still around. Everyone else has kind of failed. At least according to how Fan is interpreting it based on previous after video talks. I want to see just what he can do, because he's probably the most equivalent to a Space Marine in the sense that, well, not a Space Marine, a librarian. The competition is very slim. That's the only reason I say that. Because he actually does tap into the Force in the closest to best way possible, other than going full-on absolute Sith, which would also be the absolute best way possible to confront a librarian. Mastery of it. But either way, I'm excited, because he's the one kind of Jedi that I think might survive this. I hope. I really hope Obi-Wan doesn't die here. Oh, dear God. He's the one character I don't want to see die. Even Ahsoka, if it's appropriately epic, I can deal with. I just want Obi-Wan to live, man.
The Jedi Master could feel his heart beating heavily in his chest. Heavily, but not rapidly.
Oh.
The fight had gone on and on, so he had discarded the luxury of panic and the indulgence of uncertainty. Just doing what he had done already had required all of his focus.
But he could do it, though.
Required that he embrace Soresu in its entirety. Even that had barely been enough.
I'm actually
now
excited.
He stood, a lone knight against a monster.
Also, even just compared to the previous episodes, Fan is putting much more emphasis on his words here. A lone knight against a monster. Like, hear this. He's drawing out syllables and adding extra oomph to them. He's emphasizing it to such an extent that you can tell, I'm pretty sure he's as hyped for the scene as we are. Oh, man.
Now he stood.
Please don't make this another cliffhanger.
Knight against a monster, and he would not fear. The inhuman warrior seemed to warp forward. No muscles, no joints moving or even twitching in the sudden lunge.
Actually warp his librarian.
Looming wide and tall before Obi-Wan.
Or he just moved fast.
The sudden transportation was almost enough to shock the Jedi to weakness. A thing which would have proven lethal as the Space Marine swung down his stave in a straight, thundering strike. The Jedi Master had discarded all expectations, however, merely accepting all new things as they occurred. His animal mind shrieking within the containment of his enforced tranquility.
Yeah.
He caught the weapon on his, letting it slide down to one side in a silken parry. Leaping forward with the same movement. His lightsaber followed the stave, pinning it below Obi-Wan as he propelled himself towards the Marine's face and kicked, aiming for the monster's nose.
Oh.
The Master's eyes grew wide then, as he watched, shock spilling into his demeanor despite himself.
Because he's the first person who's done anything in any way, shape, or form unpredictable. Because everyone else has been like, I'm going to use my force powers, or I'm going to use my lightsaber, and nothing else has happened. He's actually showing some modicum of, let's do something surprising. It's probably surprising because everyone else has kind of confirmed his bias that they don't know what the fuck they're doing in an actual war. Because while they're generals, they're not good. Intentionally because of Palpatine.
His heel landing not upon the Astartes' smirking face,
probably caught it,
but in the man's waiting palm. He had released the stave with one hand as he swung. The swing itself being no more than a trick, a feint leading to this moment.
Oh, he actually read it?
The Marine gripped the heel in his left hand,
that's
squeezing,
not good.
crushing, and sighed in soft disappointment as his fingers crumpled the boot utterly flat.
Because it's still probably not armored nearly enough to resist a Space Marine in power armor. Now, it might not be enough to resist a Space Marine out of power armor for all I know.
Obi-Wan reeled back, having slid his foot out of the boot in the last second before it was crushed. His freed foot feeling cool as the air of the orrery made contact with his slick sock.
I gotta say, I love these images right here, just like the play-by-play giving really good idea of what they look like. Because there's that little moment of the cocked head going, oh, saw that. Oh.
The Jedi backed off, a single sweat-laden footprint trail following him as he
So the
did.
surprise was the boot being empty.
I am not the first user of Soresu that you've encountered, Obi-Wan concluded.
No.
Probably a few others he killed.
Not.
The Marine agreed.
In the
At
previous fight?
least I assume you are not.
Because it was the previous fight.
I do not know this style of fighting by a name. But your Luminara was quite proficient in it.
Luminara?
It is, in fact, the reason that she was the last one left alive.
Oh.
It is an enduring method of fighting, but it cannot conquer me.
I mean, technically, sheer attrition means he kind of could. If literally nothing else interferes at all, and he makes no mistakes, and you don't make any sudden decisions that actually advantage it. Yeah, actually, never mind. It almost guarantees it can advantage all. Details.
Soon I'll have you just as I had her, with very similar results in the end.
I doubt that. Really
The
doubt that.
Astartes added a moment later, as the circling began anew. Maybe, said the Jedi Master. He leapt forward then, breaking with the convention of his style and thrusting with his saber, sucking in the force in a surge of speed and strength he could maintain for but an instant. The maneuver appeared eerily similar to the Space Marine's own initial attack,
Using
though
the warp,
they were
yeah.
each
Or the
accomplished
Force.
in entirely novel fashions, unrelated to the other. Nonetheless, the attack had a similar effect, forcing the Space Marine to snap up a parry, savagely hooking the Jedi saber with his staff and pulling him in.
Ooh.
Obi-Wan was forced to choose between releasing his saber or being dragged into the pull of the Marine
And definitely
the
safe to get rid of
warrior's
the saber.
free driving fist, which was much as he had planned it. Allowing himself to be pulled forward, Obi-Wan drew the saber he had found on the floor. Before the meeting
Oh, he actually pulled in. I thought he was going. Oh, I want to hear that again.
forward, Obi-Wan drew the saber he had found on the floor. Before the meeting with the Imperial warrior. Its bright yellow blade flickered to life in a hand the Space Marine had thought free of weapons. And
Does it matter when
Safran
you have the
suddenly
Force?
found himself trapped by his own maneuver.
Because he was expecting him
The
to fall
deceitful
back.
strike having tricked him into his own folly. Seeing only one way through, Safran's eyes blazed blue in his skull,
Psychic power.
pulsing
yeah.
and flaring like twin suns going nova. He bellowed a roar which shook the bones of those present. And instead of withdrawing the fist he had planned to use to cave in Kenobi's skull, he pushed even more power and energy into it, and punched forward with all his might. As the Jedi lanced into the fist with his yellow saber, the Space Marine
Is he deflecting a freaking lightsaber with his hand because, fuck you, I have space magic? This is insane and I love it.
Was suddenly sheathed in a radiating cloak of power, and his fist, likewise overlaid by the field of energy, caught the saber and stopped it in place without being pierced. Whirlwinds burst from the contact as the skill of the Jedi and the will of the Kyber crystal collided with the direct touch of the librarian's mind.
Man, I don't like when you go to black. Okay, there's still... I thought he was going to pull another cliffhanger, son of a bitch if he had. This is so freaking hype, man. I love this. Also because it's literally space magic versus space magic using a giant weapon. Or, I guess, accurate size lightsaber weapon. But that means he still has the other weapon he can use, too. Sorry, this is so many cool little moments here. And you know this is one of those crazy parts where he's like, oh yeah, here's the weapon I found earlier. And that only makes sense because he set that up how many freaking episodes ago? I'm sure he probably put it in there. Just that little bit of, oh yeah, we're going to do this. And he put it in probably months ago because who knows how long it actually took to make this. Actually, probably about a week because he seems to have an obscenely fast struggle time. Just Freudian slip there. The turnaround time.
Light flared in expanding bursts, and it was all Safran could do to keep his feet under him as he pushed against the saber's will to destroy his limb. Blood trickled in small streams from his nose,
just magic.
But he had broken Eldari Farseers on the breadth of his will before. And compared to that mind war, this was as nothing.
Yeah, they might be better, but also they're way more arrogant. They expect to win. They probably don't fight nearly as hard.
Those were the thoughts he held close as he roared once more with breath he did not have. His voice a demonic quake of unsound. The saber which screeched and bit against his fist seemed to
that's where that was from. Literally the bleeding of the hand.
Struggling streams of power. The yellow light suddenly flushing deep, unbidden crimson before the hilt burst in the Jedi's hand. The Space Marine grinned in savage triumph, the expression meeting his face mere milliseconds before Kenobi's now sock-sheathed heel met his nose.
He actually punched him!
Safran's spun heel met his nose. Crunch! Safran spun away as Kenobi kicked off, coming down a short distance to the Space Marine's right,
or was it the heel of the
landing in
foot?
a small clatter of armor and rising as he discarded the half-molten saber from his smoking, burnt hand.
He actually went in, got dragged into a feint, and made up for it by actually either hitting with the heel of the fist or heel of the foot. I'm going with because he kicked off the heel of the foot. And he actually surprised him this time, right? He's like, I've beaten people far superior in terms of power. Oh yeah? Boot to the face. He actually got a boot to the face.
The Jedi pushed the pain of his singed limb aside, flooding it with the Force to ensure that it would continue to serve him. The Space Marine turned to face him, nose crooked, a wide, toothy grin stretched across his face.
Amidst an order of witchling waifs, I am finding you to be a uniquely delightful challenge.
He's actually enjoying this.
It gratifies me that it is a human who ultimately stands before me and brings me some measure of pause.
The Imperial said, leaning his stave against his shoulder as he reached up carefully with his gauntleted hands. Obi-Wan cringed visibly as the Space Marine straightened his own nose, snorting out globs of blood afterwards in an utterly casual fashion.
I just want to take a moment to thank Fan for not putting in sound effects to represent the sound of the nose being straightened, because I've seen people do that. And Fan has done some crazy sound effect work where he could do that, and I'm pretty sure he could do it well. I hate the passion. They make me literally nauseous. But people do it, and they do it well. It's like, I appreciate this for the skill you put into doing it, but goddamn you for having the skill to do it. Thank you, Fan, for not doing it and choosing just to let that go with a little background music instead. It's much nicer to not have to do a recording while feeling like I'm going to throw up on my mic. It's happened a few times, not the throwing up part, but the feeling like I'm going to. Oh.
The Jedi Master reset his stance and spoke once more. I can see you are tiring, Space Marine. You are indeed built for war, and between the first group you encountered and my stand here, you've gotten one. But will you win it? The Jedi shook his head as if to answer for the Astartes.
Probably, because he has more reforms
Trust
than
me,
possible.
I have defeated weapons like you before, and I'll do so again as many times as I need to. The Astartes raised his eyebrow at that, a gesture Kenobi was only able to infer from the movement of his cheeks. The
Smile.
upper half of his face now wreathed in shadow, his eyes dimming once more, though the blue light there never vanished.
That's not good.
You've defeated Space Marines in the past.
He asked. Not as such, no, but I've defeated men made for war. Men who embraced both foul sorcery and technology to become killers. Men made by dark masters to be insurmountable in the field of battle. And I've bested each one, and I best them every time, said the Jedi.
Technically true.
The Space Marine did not respond right away.
He's literally referring to Maul partially, not the entire... He doesn't know about the aesthetic or, I guess, cyborg leg part yet. But definitely the Masters with Dark Sorcery. It's definitely a reference to Maul, and then probably a bunch of others I don't even recognize because I didn't follow Clone Wars nearly that much yet. There's a few that probably count. Just... Technically fighting Anakin later, even though it's not what he's referencing, but it would also count if this was set much later. Huh.
Watching with his unsettling, smoldering eyes as they circled one another. Obi-Wan was not rushing, taking his time to look for openings, seek his chance.
I can sense that you are not lying. At least, not from your point of view.
A battle you walk away from is a
The Space
victory.
Marine rumbled at length.
So, I shall not lie either. Yes, I am somewhat worn down by all the
Somewhat,
fighting
though. But that
has
doesn't
come
matter much for
before
Space Marines.
now. But Jedi, you do not yet understand the kind of war I was created to fight.
Not in the slightest.
For you,
That's an
fighting
information
for
problem.
Minutes, hours, even days at a time are skills to be remarked, to be honed. To you and to most of your order, today has brought you to the pinnacle of your strength, and perhaps beyond it. Am I wrong?
Yeah, and this is one of the few times I'm going to acknowledge something that I don't usually. These kind of in-universe boasts set out of world, normally when this is happening, I despise it because it's done badly. It's someone's like, oh yes, here's all these things I've done that I recognize are great and you should fear them because I say they're horrible. And everyone else is going like, oh my God, they said something horrible. They said they've done all these things. This is mind-blowing. That is annoying because you don't have that kind of reaction because you don't understand what that means. This, though, is the kind of in-universe boast given to someone out of universe that works because it's after having that demonstration. And that's the only time that works because he's like, oh, yes, I see that you are weighing down. That's as close to Ian McGregor's voice I'm going to get. And it's sadly probably one of the best impersonations I've ever done. And it was absolutely horrible. But more importantly, that one little observation is like, okay, here's what you think. I'm now going to put that in context of no, this is nothing. This is going from unwinded to needing to get to my second wind, and we haven't got to my first wind ending yet. This is just that first rush of power being wound down. Granted, it's the warp, so it probably can fuck around a ton, which is what I would normally say, except this is the Force fueling it instead, and that's different. Doesn't seem like he's actually picked up on that yet, though, which is weird considering, I think it was Gax, I'm probably getting his name wrong, tore things up with that. And a Space Marine Librarian could probably reach that level normally. He hasn't drawn so heavily yet because he's so controlled, he probably doesn't feel he has to yet. What would happen if Obi-Wan pushed him to the point where he would have to overdraw and then realize he could overdraw? I don't know. They're so incredibly controlled and precise that might not happen. Although it would probably happen eventually in a really intense moment that would be really interesting because fan would not let it happen at a boring moment.
The Jedi said nothing, which the Imperial clearly figured told him everything. The Psyker paused and shook his head before looking up at the Jedi Master with an expression which very nearly bordered on pity.
To me, Jedi,
He's explaining it now.
this war
Is a warm-up?
is just another xenocide.
Barely that.
Not only is all you see before you the definition of routine, but if I had to point out an aspect of this conflict that makes it notable.
Much fewer Space Marines. They're actually succeeding a lot faster. It's easier than normal. Yeah, all of that technically is true.
I would be forced to concede that the only novelty I've felt in this fight before now is how pathetically unprepared the Republic was for a true, determined enemy.
And the irony in that is the completely true way to face it, because while they think they're fighting an all-out war, from the outside we know that's not the case, because Palpatine is very much masterminding both sides of this between him and Dooku. It's not an all-out war. It's okay, where do we want to deal with this kind of shit right now? It's supposed to look like an all-out war. It's supposed to present fear like an all-out war. But it's very much a showpiece war with real stakes to people who don't matter to Palpatine. Also known as anyone who's not Palpatine, because he's not going to be threatened. It's literally all according to plan, because the plan was put in place by people who admittedly seemed like they were a lot smarter than him. And just the few things I've heard about Plagueis when they come to his own novels, he's, one, a dick. Two, set everything up in advance, and Palpatine was just really damn good at carrying it through and politically savvy as hell. But he's not letting them have an actual war because he doesn't want to fight an actual war. He wants a nice controlled conflict that looks like an actual war so he can win, which we know is exactly what happens. Space Marine also picked it up immediately because they've seen all-out war where there is no turning back. I wonder if anyone survives this, they'll actually start picking up on that. Because that's the kind of comment that does kind of ring in your head. We need to prepare more, which then might lead him to thinking, why haven't we? I don't know. I don't think it would go that way, but I could be mistaken.
Obi-Wan grit his teeth, apprehension flooding his gut and turning to fury before he seized it. This man was boasting, but that did not mean he was lying
wrong.
as well.
Or lying, yeah.
Indeed, from everything Obi-Wan could sense, he wasn't doing any such thing. He was barely even barbing his sentiment. "You boast well enough, I'll give you that much," said the Jedi. "But talking big is not the same as making good on it. And there is nothing you can say that will make me abandon my democracy or my order." The Astartes' broad smile returned at that, evidently pleased with Kenobi's defiance.
Good.
You'd be disappointed if you gave in at this point.
Then I shall face you fully.
Oh.
He said, leaving Obi-Wan
is he actually going
in
to fully
silence.
go?
The Space Marine's
yeah.
grin only grew deeper at that, and he stopped circling, stepping forward instead.
Do not mistake me, heretic. You are skilled enough to hold my focus, so let me be clear and honest as I hold theirs. Let those Jedi around us who may yet live to flee carry with them this knowledge. I am now going to crush you, break you, and bend you to the will of the Emperor.
That was not going how I thought. Bend, break, crush, sure, maybe literal. He can do that to the will of the Emperor. That is surprising in two very unique ways. One, because it means he's willing to take someone who is an enemy fighting for the Xenos and thinking, you've impressed me enough that I want you on my side. Partially because I want to destroy you utterly, break everything you know, and I want to have that complete victory of turning you into my puppet or ally or who knows what. On the other hand, it's also bad because this is the first time they're actually bringing up the mind control aspects, which really aren't touched on nearly as much Star Wars. Like, there's aspects of that, but it's never really a big thing here, where in 40K, yeah, your mind's fucked if anyone actually tries anything. It's almost impossible to stop. Unless you're a high-level psyker yourself. It's like, ha ha ha, fuck you. I have plot armor. Oh, what it is. Doesn't happen often, but...
Those here will go with the full knowledge that you came against me with every strength you could
And we're turned into their pawn. Is what you want, but...
And if they are
would Fan
allowed
do that?
to flee, they will do so burdened with the undeniable proof that it was all not nearly enough.
I mean, oh, you son of a bitch, you're actually meanwhiling us right here. I'm going to finish this video because... Fuck! But seriously, man, that is... You get to the boast of him impressing the Space Marine enough that he's going to Brendan Brack him. Wow, I can't speak. Break him to the will of the Emperor, which is potentially leaving him alive. I don't think Fan would just kill Obi-Wan off this fast, especially when he made such good points about him being such a really good Jedi to be one of the only real good ones left. Because everyone else is either about to fall or given up or kind of lost their way completely. He made good arguments about how Windu has basically already fallen and not realized it. I'm not sure I agree completely, but it's how he's interpreting, so let's go with it. But I could see him turning Obi-Wan through mind control as a way to keep Obi-Wan in the story to have that plot progress without having him win here. It's a fail condition to continue his plot point. But also might turn into way more fucked up means than that. Depending on what they do. Survival in the Imperium is usually not the safe option. So who are we going to now?
Are you seriously still searching for it? I thought you were supposed to be good at this. Whined one of the nearby clones.
Oh.
Echo had no idea who he was too busy,
to go back to Echo.
focusing too much to pay any attention to their banter. The cyborg was sitting in what remained of Admiral Trench's command chair, a thick cable linking his access probe to the chair's systems.
Oh, they already got there? Wow, they're probably the most successful people yet we've seen.
Though he was seated and his body seemed relaxed, his face did not reflect that. Brows furrowed, sweat creasing the wrinkles on his head, it was clear he was not having an easy time of it. I am good at this. A droid wouldn't last 5 seconds inside code this badly ruptured. Sorting through all of this is like stuffing a Wookiee, a Zabrak, and a Devaronian into a blender and trying to sort the teeth from the horns, he said through clenched teeth.
No, seriously, Fan, what the hell were you thinking that that's the metaphor you came up with? Shoving a Wookiee into a blender. I mean, it's evocative, but what the fuck, man?
Excuses. The clone jibed half-heartedly.
Ahsoka dropping?
A few chuckled nervously as well, but none did so earnestly, not even the clone who had spoken the joke. They were all tense and coping, all fully aware of what had happened with the commander, and that even after recovering her, Ahsoka's condition had remained critical.
Okay, so they have her.
They
that's
knew she would likely pull through.
But
that Bacta, combined with her well-worn grit, would carry her over any hurdle these injuries could.
I just realized what they're doing here. Sorry, I don't usually comment on the art, but they have her similar face markings on their helmets, showing that they're her unit. Is that something they actually did in Clone Wars? Because that's actually really cool. I don't think they did, but that's neat.
Could pose. They knew that, but still, they all worried. Even Echo. But he shoved it all aside. Somewhere, lost in all this ruptured data and rated systems, was the system control for the bomb on an axis. He knew they couldn't hold the ship, not indefinitely.
Turn it off or explode
And
it.
already he had been forced to detour from his search in order to close bulkheads and seal off the captured separatist vessel from the Imperial vessel which was adhered to it.
Oh!
Ray shields and Durasteel. But for how long could those barriers hold against the dedicated breaching attempt? Echo pushed that thought out of the way as well.
They know about the bomb, but
all that
how far did they
mattered
spread
in
the
the
info?
end was finding the controls for the bomb. That was all. So it was that even as the doors into the bridge opened, Echo continued to work. That even as the newcomer strode in behind him, drawing the attention of all other clones,
who's behind him?
Notice. How's the search coming, Echo? Asked Ahsoka. The clone jerked, blinking, only half able to see through his own true eyes, sunken into the system as he was. Still, it was enough sight that he could see her when he turned to look to his right. She was alive, though certainly not unscathed. One of her arms was bound in a sling, and though she had received Bacta treatments, her limp suggested that she would benefit from a cast as well.
Ew.
Scorch marks marred the skin around her face, and her montrals were slightly discolored, bruised.
Ow.
Still, it was good to see her, and he gave her a brief grin before returning his focus. Not as well as your recovery, Commander. Imps completely scrambled the system, tore it apart searching for usable intel. I'm having trouble navigating anything in here, he said. Ahsoka sighed. A gentle gust of air passed lips lightly caked in her own blood. And she shook her head.
Showing the little extra detail
I thought
there.
as much. You can stop searching, Echo. I don't think we are going to find it. It probably isn't even on an axis anymore,
What?
she said.
The bomb.
What? Why? The clone asked.
They'd move it.
Because I spoke with that captive priest before he escaped, and he told me a lot about these people and how they think.
Oh?
More than he probably intended.
Oh!
These tech priests, they would be more interested in how our bomb works than in adding it to their arsenal.
Yeah, because honestly, when it comes to world-ending things, they kind of have an op already. Finding out how it works, though, these are probably more radical because there are definitely some people in the Mechanicum, whatever there are, that actually in both, that would gladly tear it apart to learn everything. Then there's others who would be like, not entirely human. Tech heresy! And then there's also the third faction be like, tech heresy! But I'm going to look on the side. Don't ever find out I did. There's always that divide between the radicals and the orthodoxies in actually everything in the Imperium. So, yeah. These are probably the more dangerous radicals, though, who are less likely to hamper everyone on their own team by just doing anything possible. There's also post-call becoming a thing, so I guess that makes a lot more sense, too.
It honestly might be more permissible in their religion to take our technology apart than to actually use it, the former Jedi said. Are you sure about that, Commander? It's not every day you come across a planet cracker.
I mean,
Ahsoka
for you,
laughed
yeah.
at that, and the sound chilled Echo down to his bones. Maybe not for us, she said, and left it at that. Echo nodded and began to withdraw himself from the system.
Not every day for 40K.
It was then that he noticed something wrong.
What?
It was not obvious, not at first, but when he finally caught the change, it sent his cyberdized mind into a frenzy.
In her or someone else?
Commander, the imps aren't trying to get in anymore.
What?
Echo said, straining to control his voice.
That usually means bigger weapons.
Ahsoka raised an eyebrow at that, not quite grasping what he meant, though Echo was already taking action. He began clearing the airlocks, severing the umbilicals that the Imperials had connected all over the ship. They aren't trying to get in?
They're going
asked
to blow
the former Jedi. What do you mean? Echo grimaced, sweat sliding from his slightly gray skin and running over the rigid steel of his cybernetics.
The only reason they would pull back is it because they don't need the ship anymore. Oh, they're probably about to fire on it.
Ahsoka, I mean that the imps aren't banging on the airlocks or trying to cut their way in. In fact, I think that they've largely retreated from the ship. They aren't trying to make holdouts, he said. So what does that mean?
You need to get off the
asked,
ship.
Clearly alarmed, though the origin of her tension came more from Echo's tone than from his actual words.
He's probably trying to figure it out. They don't pull back easy.
It means, Echo said, struggling with the final ties that bound the two vessels together, that they don't want the ship anymore! He almost yelled. His words proved prophecy. For the next few moments, warning alarms and sirens began to flicker and blare across the bridge. The ship rocked suddenly, and the sound of metal screeching could be heard by everyone aboard. What's happening right now, Echo? Ahsoka yelled as she braced herself against a nearby console with her good hand. Weapons locks! The Imperial ship is targeting us with its broadside-mounted weapons! Echo called back. Ahsoka paled ever so slightly. Get us out of here, Echo! she ordered.
Can he?
Already on it, he called back. The ship screeched again, and the rocking that came with the sound was almost enough to shake Ahsoka to the floor.
Can I get to
as
light speed?
many clones were. I can't promise we'll take all the ship with us, though. He added
If
a
you don't,
moment
you're leaving
later.
all of it behind.
Ahsoka nodded and tapped her comm piece. Rex, rally the 501st and bring everyone to the bridge, prisoners included, she ordered.
Oh, how many
Aye,
prisoners did they
Commander,
take?
he called back over the earpiece. No sooner had the response been received than another quake shook the ship, causing the lights to flicker all across the bridge. Got it, we're loose, Echo called. Deploy the countermeasures, Ahsoka ordered as she hung on to the console. Roger!
Light speed or this and
Echo called back.
right now.
He did what he could, activating the sporadic systems of the ship's defenses as the engines, or what was left of them, burned at full. The effort was just enough to avoid the cascading row of cannons that had faced them, but was not quite enough to avoid the shoulder-mounted laser battery that the Imperial warship had prepared. The beam struck the rear of the ship, mangling the pathetic veil of shields that Echo had managed to erect before impact. Engines are gone! Echo yelled.
Hyperdrive is
How
probably
much?
gone.
Ahsoka called back. Everything, he said. Ahsoka grit her teeth and looked out through the massive transparent canopy of the bridge.
Fuck, man. You can't see it, but I got like goosebumps on my arm. I'm actually nervous. I didn't expect this to be such a setup episode after all the previous setup episodes, but he just keeps hyping this higher. I thought the payoff would have been the freaking Jedi fight, but no, that was even further hype. Just showing us Obi-Wan is holding his own and just making do, and maybe not being as strong or tough, but he's doing it. And then, no, I'm going to go full. He's literally doing the trope of, I'll show you my true power. Considering that's a trope that actually works in Star Wars often, it actually fits, but just... I'm assuming engines gone mean also the hyperdrive, and I'm assuming that was already disabled or they didn't know about. Would they actually recognize the hyperdrive? That's like, unless it's functionally the same type of energy and how they move through subspace or hyperspace, and it's actually just a warp, but by a different name. Entirely possible.
Axum hung outside like a false promise, never to be
gonna
reached.
try and land?
But Echo
crash?
saw something different. He triggered the maneuvering thrusters and
What?
began rolling the ship on its side, angling towards the planet.
He's landing.
Ahsoka saw the disorienting tilt begin and looked over at the clone.
He's actually
confusion
doing the
clearly
freaking
writ on
third
her
episode
face.
crash landing.
Echo, what are you... she
Stupid
began.
things.
They might fire at their own forces, and they will definitely fire at us, the clone began to say.
But they'll probably hit
But they
some of your
won't
own.
fire on the temple. If I can bring us down that way, with just maneuvering thrusters? Ahsoka
you son
asked.
of a bitch.
We are trapped, Commander. No way out, but it's not my first time. In moments like these, the only way I've ever made it through is by asking myself a very specific question.
What?
He said, sinking more and more of himself into the wounded ship.
What would Anakin
His
do?
vision blurred and vanished. His skin became steel, brushed against the void and hateful heat of lethal wounds.
Blending
His
into the
eyes
ship.
became sensors, half functioning as the light atmosphere around them began to heat. His limbs became the burning maneuvering thrusters, clawing at space to escape the sights of the enemy weapons. And what question is that? Asked Ahsoka. What would General Skywalker do? And if General
Called it.
Skywalker was trapped on a half-dying Providence class while stuck in the middle of an active battle? I know exactly what he would do.
And that explains why he picked up this image, because I'm pretty sure this is the image from the third episode where he did just that and crash landed it. Also near the temple, I think. Oh my god, he's... Yeah, what would Anakin do is usually a good way to figure out how to survive impossible odds. Also a horrible idea in any other situation.
The clone said, a fierceness
Oh my
entering
God.
his voice which made it clear to the Togrutan commander that the clone fully expected to die in the attempt of this. She said nothing against it, for there was no other way she could see. Instead, she tightened her grip and asked,
Hold on
So
tight.
what do you think Anakin would do?
Not die.
Echo allowed the insanity of the moment of his life to
God.
overwhelm his countenance. Half clone, half droid, half dying ship. He clenched his teeth in a manic grin as he answered, eyes wide and seeing nothing. He'd land it. He'd land it right on top of their fracking heads.
Oh, dude. Oh my god, Echo is going full orc. He's literally crashing the ship into the ground for the wog. I mean, it's not for the wog, of course, but he's actually doing it. An insane bastard. I love this. I absolutely love this. Oh, man. I thought the high point would have been the Jedi fight. No, it was Echo being an absolute mad lad. I love this. Especially how, like, you have that moment of him going in and, like, I'm becoming the ship type situation, which admittedly is actually really close to what a lot of the knights would become. Like, a lot of the pilots actually do that. Not so much, no, not, sorry, Titan pilots eventually get merged into the ship in the more mental sense because they get stuck in the amniotic containers. I'm not actually sure what's in the container. Might not be amniotic fluid, but just the fluid containers where they're suspended for the rest of their lives until they die because they're just unable to leave and disconnect from the Titan anymore. And they're too valuable to replace because they don't have someone often. And he's basically doing that with the ship right now, minus the not getting disconnected part. Even if he does go out in a blaze of glory, that's one hell of a blaze. I love this for one other reason, though. Not just the sheer badassery of it, but because it's taking something that the initial setup to this episode probably didn't take into account. That definitely not Chaos Sorcerer, the Inquisitor, was setting this up as I'm going to manipulate them to make the Imperium lose, to give the Star Wars side hope, and then draw it back to unify. Which is a stupid plan, but I could see someone corrupted by chaos completely going for it. It's self-defeating. It works great up until it doesn't. You know, enter chaos. Dropping a ship into the temple is a really good way to fuck with his plans by doing exactly what he wanted in all the ways he didn't want. Oh. Because there's probably a lot of people there who they thought were in a safe location because nothing they have is really powerful enough to break it. Throwing a ship at it is usually a good way. I mean, orcs do it. It's one of the reasons they're effective. They throw moons at people. Specifically, attack moons. Not often. But the few times they actually got up to that point, it was very effective. Or the beast was bullshit. But I want more, man. And if it wasn't ungodly late at night, I would definitely do that. But I know for a fact, if I start recording, I will fall asleep in the middle of the video and miss a lot of it. I don't want to do that. I want to be fully awake for this, man. Fortunately, I can't have enough caffeine to fix that because adulting. More importantly, this was amazing. For everyone who's still here, you guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. Fan's awesome. Just go rewatch the video. And if you like the stuff I'm using, I got a links to the products for like the mic, the arm, the headphones. I might put other things in because I know when I first started doing YouTube and when I was trying to upgrade my setup, it would be useful to have that kind of information. So yeah, I'll put a product link to it in case you're looking to try and just get decent stuff. I like it. Can't say it's the best, but it was affordable and I can like it and use it. More the like it than use it part because me using it isn't actually a sign of quality. Just a sign that it's idiot proof. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.